What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Gameweek11 deadline, which is of course on Friday this week. It's 6:30 UK time. It's not the usual Saturday slot, so keep that in mind. You need to make your decisions today. And I'm going to go through a bunch of kind of questions and topics that you've put to me on Twitter, a bit like the Gameweek preview, just for anything that I've missed. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Now, if you've noticed over the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to put this video out a little bit later than I normally do on a Friday ahead of a Saturday deadline to get all the latest press conference information, because sometimes a manager says something and that completely changes our strategy. But unfortunately, with the Friday deadline, I've got to put this video out a little bit earlier. And as you can see from the deadline, the press conference times that were posted by Fantasy Football Scout, the ones we really want are Graham Potter for Reece James, not till 1:30, and Marco Silva also at 1:30, and obviously that's for Mitrovic. So that's a little bit frustrating. I guess some people are also waiting for Pep Guardiola as well, because he did kind of indicate that maybe Haaland hadn't recovered well enough for midweek, and Foden was having some issues, etc. I think they're going to be fine for Liverpool for what it's worth, but that's going to be worth noting as well. So I can't wait till I've seen them, then record, then get it uploaded. There'll only be a few hours until the deadline. So what I'm going to do instead is just give you my thoughts on the two main players, James and Mitrovic, including replacements. And if there's any major information from the press conferences, I will put it in the comments, or I'll put a pinned comment on my updated thoughts. But the reality is, we're probably going to get something like Marco Silva's going to say, we're still assessing him day by day. He might be okay for Bournemouth, if not, hopefully for Villa, right? So that'll be no different to last week. And Potter's probably going to say, not very good for Villa, might be okay the week after, we'll have to see, right? So chances of us getting definitive, they're definitely out for 2 or 3 weeks. It seems unlikely, but we might get it. If we do, I'll put a comment, right? So let's talk about Reece James, okay? So if he's confirmed out for 2 weeks, and there is a possibility that could happen, right? He might say that he's potentially back for Man United, which would be game week 13. And if he says something like that and he's confirmed out for 2 weeks, I do think he's sellable. I still think there is a lack of defender options. There's nothing really that exciting out there, especially if you've got Trippier already. And even he hasn't got great fixtures over the next 3. But if he's confirmed out for 2 weeks, then I think you can probably look at selling him. You could delay the decision 1 week if you have a decent bench. So if you've got someone you're happy to play this week, I've got Gay, for example, for Crystal Palace. I'm not completely happy about playing him for what it's worth, but he's okay to play. I'm happy to delay the decision to next week, depending on what Potter says. Because if James is back for game week 12, then I do quite like him, like keeping hold of him, basically, because there's not a huge amount of other options. I do feel, though, like I've kind of already said, there is a lack of options for the next 2 weeks. It's one of the reasons, ideally, I want to delay the decision. Like I said, if he's out for 2 weeks for sure, I'll just get someone in, I think. But if he's not, there's really a lack of options that I want to bring in. So I'd rather give myself 1 more game week's worth of thinking time, although the deadline is Tuesday, so that makes it even more complicated. This is the reason I think he's possibly sellable if he's out for 2 weeks. His fixtures from game week 13 are Man United at home, Brighton away, Arsenal at home, Newcastle away. I think all 4 of those fixtures are going to be difficult enough to keep a clean sheet. Now, we know Chelsea defence is one of the best in the league. Potter is a very good defensive manager as well. That's not to take anything away from his attacking output as well. He is decent at that too. But his teams tend to be hard to break down, so they could still get some clean sheets there, but I do think it's going to be difficult, and I don't think he's going to be essential to hold. He obviously has the upside that he's very attacking, but if you're not sure about the next couple of weeks and then he comes back to those fixtures, it's maybe not the worst time to not own him. Again, there's, with Trent injured and Liverpool not defending well, with Cancelo blanking in game week 12, playing Liverpool away this week, there's not a huge amount of other options, which is what makes Reece James even more desirable right now. But they are not the greatest fixtures. So keep in mind what Potter says and then decide whether or not you want to sell him. I would say the best options are probably going for a Brighton defender, Dunk or Webster. A few people asking me about Estepinian, but I just think this isn't a position you want to keep changing, right? From game week 13 to 16, you want to concentrate your transfers probably on Man City or Arsenal players. You don't want to have to be worrying that your Brighton defender's not going to play. And Estepinian might play all those fixtures, but I think you just take the kind of 90-minute men instead, Dunk and Webster. Dunk if you want to be kind of absolutely sure. Kilman's got a decent enough fixture this week, Nottingham Forest at home, then it's Crystal Palace away, not so easy. I'm a little bit worried about Wolves. They still don't have a new manager, And it looks like they might be getting a previous manager back, which can't be a good thing, I don't think, but we'll see about that. Doherty, I think there's a good chance he starts the next 2 fixtures. He didn't play in the Champions League. As I missed out yesterday, Emerson Royal is suspended for 2 more games. So it's a very good chance that Doherty plays against Everton at home this week, then Man United away. I would say that's a bit of a punt because I don't see a clean sheet in game week 12. But if he does play the next 2 and he gets you a big score against Everton, happy days. I think that all depends on the rest of your squad. If you're putting him in and he's a player that you need to play every week, like ideally if he was going to play every week, that would be brilliant because he's a great option, very attacking. But we don't know that for sure. Once Emerson Royal is back, there could be a bit of rotation. So I think he's a bit of a 2-week punt. And after that, I wouldn't want to have to rely on him too much. Trippier if you don't own. Castagna if you want the pain of owning someone from Leicester. You could go for Justin as well. I think he's a bit cheaper, but Castagna seems to be more attacking. And if you want to go for a Chelsea defender, Koulibaly is probably the one that I would get. But I think Chelsea are a defence I'm probably going to ignore. I think next 2 fixtures are both away. Then you run into those kind of next 4 games. And look, they are a solid defensive team, but I don't think Koulibaly necessarily has enough attacking threat for me to want to go for him. So that's Reece James. Let's quickly come on to Mitrovic as well. So if it's not for certain that he's going to play against Bournemouth and there's a bit of doubt, the good news is there is a big gap between game weeks 11 and 12 for Fulham. They play on Saturday. They don't play again until Thursday. Some teams will play kind of Friday, Saturday, then play Tuesday. For Fulham, there's a big gap. So if he's not back for this one, he could be back for Aston Villa at home. You are kind of reliant, though, on getting some updated news about him because it'd be really annoying now if he misses last week Bournemouth and then Villa. And because the game's on Thursday, we won't necessarily get a press conference from Marco Silva before the game week 12 deadline. So that's a bit annoying. But depending on what happens this week and whether we see him on the bench and stuff like that, you can then maybe make your decision without a press conference. I think this week, if you've got Andreas Pereira on the bench, obviously still got the same fixture, Bournemouth at home, and you're not sure about selling Mitrovic, you could just use him for cover. I don't think that's the end of the world. People did that last week and it worked out pretty well. The fixtures from game week 13, this is another slight issue. Look, Leeds away and Everton at home are okay, but then it's Man City away, Man United at home. That's not as ideal. And Mitrovic is still a really great option. He's cheap, 90 minutes, penalties, all that stuff we know about. But if we have to wait until game week 13 until we can play him again, you've only really got 2 nice fixtures left. Man City away is very tough. Man United at home might be okay. Fulham are probably the kind of team that can get at Man United, but I don't see massive scores there. It's one of those fixtures I wouldn't be worried about if I was keeping Mitrovic all the way through and he was fully fit. But it's not a fixture I'd outrightly go and target either. So for me, if Marco Silva says that he's a doubt for Villa as well as Bournemouth this week, then I might look at selling him. I do think with forwards, there's a few more options. We're going to come on to moving funds into midfield in a minute. I think that's difficult. But you've got Jota, Darwin Núñez at Liverpool. If you want to take a little bit of a punt, they should have higher minutes now Diaz is out, but they're not necessarily going to play every single game. They might miss like one of the next 4 or 5. And obviously they're playing Man City at home this week, so that's not ideal. But Liverpool can score goals against anyone, so they could get on the score sheet in that game. Aubameyang, if you want a Chelsea forward, although obviously there's been a bit of rotation there as well, so that's a little bit worrying. Solanke, if you need someone cheap, I suggest with all the funds coming out of defence and stuff, most people don't need that right now. Tony's just a solid option, okay? He's always nailed on 90 minutes penalties, all the same stuff like Mitrovic, apart from he's not injured. The fixtures maybe aren't quite as good, but I think they're perfectly okay, right? So if you just want a solid option, I just want to put someone in. I don't want to worry about whether they're on the team sheet. I don't want to worry about them being rested because of Europe and stuff like that. Just get Tony. Possibly you could see the same thing with Wilson as well, but obviously he is just generally a little bit more injury prone. So with both of them, you could hold on another week if you wanted to, but it's getting to the point where if they're doubts for the next 2 game weeks, bearing in mind there is that midweek fixture, I think they could both be sellable at this point. So I wanted to quickly go through some of my updated team thoughts because I've got a couple of these players in my team, both James and Mitrovic, who are flagged. Obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold is red flagged as well. So there's a few different routes that I can take. This is on a transfer planner on FPL.team. Make sure to go and check that out if you haven't already. So I think my move, unless we get anything else that comes up in the press conferences, is going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold to Trippier, right? Now, Trippier doesn't have the greatest fixture this week. I'm not happy about bringing him in, like I've already said. But the main other defender that I'm personally looking at is a Brighton one, and they've got Brentford away. Now, I do think there's a better possibility of a clean sheet there, but I think both are unlikely. Trippier's been very attacking, and they've both got a good fixture in game week 12. Trippier's got Everton at home, and if I need to play them in game week 13, Trippier has Spurs away, which is definitely not easy, but Brighton have Man City away, so that's definitely not any better than playing Spurs away, right? So I'll probably look to get Trippier in. He's been hurting me anyway. He's been very consistent, so he is in. I really want to roll the free transfer into game week 12. I already feel, and I felt this for game weeks 9 and 10 since I wildcard, it's a bit of a damage limitation week, but depending on what is said about Mitrovic and James, I may just bench Mitrovic for Andreas and play Gay instead of Reece James, and then just hope that next week we get some more positive news. I'm a little bit worried that it's a midweek, but that's what I'm looking at right now, because I feel like any big move I make this week, I might not want to do next week. And one of those is bringing in a Liverpool forward. And I feel like if I'm going to delay that, why not delay it before they play Man City, which is going to be a tough fixture. So that would take me to game week 12. And there's not really a lot of leeway with players being doubts that week because of obviously the benching for all my Man City and Arsenal players. So they would obviously have to all come in. Nico Williams is an issue, but I just don't, unless Reece James and Mitrovic are fit, I don't think I can deal with Nico Williams, and I might have to just play him. But obviously next week will just depend on what is then said, and whether Mitrovic and James come off the bench and they look likely to play in game week 12. But this could be the week where I get one of Darwin or Jota. Now, a lot of people have asked me which one I would go for. I think with Darwin Núñez, he seems to be getting the majority of the chances. He tends to obviously play as one of the number 9. It often looks like they've kind of got 2 recently. But Jota minutes might be slightly better on that left-hand side because of no Diaz. So it's a little bit tricky to know which one to go for. But I think right now I'm thinking Darwin Núñez. And if Reece James is out, then I'll probably just get Duncan and then just leave it at that. That'll probably be my 2 moves. And then going into game week 13, I'll look at getting Saka in for Maddison. That will probably be what I do. With 2.2 million in the bank, so there's lots and lots of flexibility. If I just reset this game week, if Reece James and Mitrovic are fine, then I may even just go into game week 13 with 2 free transfers and just change Nico Williams to Dunk. So Brighton defenders are definitely high up my list. I just think I might get them in 12 instead of game week 11 and just go into game week 13 with 2.3 million in the bank and 2 transfers. I may still get one of the Liverpool attackers in, but that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. I just don't know whether it's worth an 11 and 12 going too crazy with like hits and stuff like that. Like there is the possibility. I'll just quickly show you this because this is on my mind as well. If James is out for 2 weeks and I think he's sellable, right? I've said sellable a lot in this video. I can get Duncan Trippier. And then I've still got 4.2 million. So if Mitrovic is fit, I could even sell Solanke and get the Liverpool forward in either this week or next week. Or if I don't go for Trippier and I go for someone cheaper like a Kilman who's got a good fixture this week, I actually have enough money if Mitrovic isn't fit to go from Mitrovic to Kane and have the triple premiums this week. So I could do something like that. Play Dunk, Kilman, Cancelo, Maddison, Zaha, Salah and Martinelli and have Kane and Haaland up front with Solanke. So that's on my mind. I'm just a little bit worried that makes me much less flexible going forward. The defence is very cheap. I'm heavily reliant on players from Wolves, Brighton, Crystal Palace. I've still got Nico Williams there. It's not necessarily ideal. There's no way to get Trippier back. Trying to get Reece James back would be hard. I don't think these are players that I'm necessarily going to need, but that is what's in the back of my mind. So I think the main move for me is just going to be Trent to Trippier, hope for the best, and roll 2 transfers into game week 12. So one thing I didn't cover on the preview yesterday was captaincy this week. Now, it looks pretty obvious for most of us. We're just going to go for Haaland. But if you've got a Spurs attacker, either Son or for most people, it's going to be Harry Kane against Everton at home, is there reason to go for him over Haaland? Now, it might be that Pep Guardiola puts doubts in our mind about Haaland in the press conference, and that might be the thing that kind of pushes people to go to Kane, which would absolutely be fine. But if Pep says that he's good to go, etc., then it becomes a little bit more difficult. So Harry Kane, on the surface of it, definitely has the better fixture, Everton at home. But we know right now the Liverpool aren't defending that well. And I said a few weeks ago that Liverpool was still kind of top 2, top 3 in terms of attack. They were still in the top 5 in terms of defensive performances. So that was expected goals conceded. They're not anymore. They conceded 1.2 expected goals per 90 minutes. That's quite bad for a Liverpool team. And we know that Man City are the best attack in the league. So they are going to cause them problems. And look, Harry Kane, people have said not been spoken about enough. That's probably true. He has been brilliant, right? He's scoring goals at 0.9 per 90 minutes. So nearly a goal every single game. His expected goals, 0.51. That's extremely good, right? For any attacker, if there was cheaper players, you know, getting those kind of numbers, we'd absolutely all have them in our team when we could. But then you look at Haaland, 0.99 expected goals per 90 minutes. That is absolutely ridiculous. And we know that he's not always on the pitch, but we also know that when the game's not won or when they're chasing and it's not quite finished yet, if he's still fit and raring to go, he's not going to get taken off the pitch. So there's every chance against Liverpool he plays 80 to 90 minutes. You can't really use penalties to split them either. I was already thinking that we hadn't actually seen, apart from a friendly, Mahrez and Haaland on the pitch when a penalty was given at the same time. But I think the fact that, I mean, Haaland is just ridiculous, and Mahrez is just missed in the Champions League. I think there's almost no chance of Mahrez getting a penalty if he's on the pitch with Haaland. But I don't think he's going to start against Liverpool anyway. I think it'll be Grealish, Haaland, and probably Foden if he's fine. So Haaland scoring at 1.8 a game, and yes, Spurs have the better fixture, but we know what Everton are going to do. They're going to try and dig in, and if Spurs struggle to break them down, it could be a bit of a long game for them. So a few weeks ago, I would have said Kane. But I think everything we've seen up until now, the fact that Liverpool just aren't defending quite as well, they're sticking to this 4-2-3-1/4-4-2 formation. I'm going to have to stick with one of them. It's either a 4-4-2 or it's a 4-2-3-1. Let me know in the comments below. And they're still not really defending that well. Like, they won 7-1 against Rangers, but Rangers still got at them and caused them a few problems. It wasn't massive, but a few. And Man City are just a step ahead. So it's just whether or not you want to take that risk, essentially. Like, and it is a big risk going against Haaland. I wouldn't always let that put you off, but in this case, he is so highly owned, 84.3%. If you are not absolutely sure that Kane is the better captain, I would probably just go for Haaland. You could look at it as an opportunity to increase your rank. If Liverpool make that game hard and Haaland doesn't get too many chances and he only scores one goal and Kane gets a couple of attacking returns, then that's suddenly like a really nice green arrow. But I just think the chance of it are just not looking great. Even against Liverpool, the odds for Haaland scoring are still ridiculously high. So I think right now we have to say he's the better choice. I hate saying that. It's very boring right now, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so let's talk about formations. Is 3-5-2 now the optimal formation until the World Cup? Should we be looking to take money out of our defence and attack, so obviously that's forwards, to upgrade Andreas Pereira to another £7 to £8 million midfielder? So on the surface of it, 3-5-2 looks pretty good right now. I think most people will agree that 3 at the back for now is the way forward, probably right up until the World Cup. There's just not enough decent attacking defenders that are doing well that are worth spending that investment, and half of them are doubts or injured anyway, right? So I think we can all agree that 3 at the back is good. Up until a few weeks ago, everybody was on 3-4-3, but all of a sudden it doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of forwards. So I get why people are looking at 5-man midfields, and I think if I was wildcarding in game week 13, could I see myself with a midfield like this? Possibly swap Martinelli in for either Salah, Bowen or Zaha. I think that's definitely something that you could do, because I think double Arsenal attack looks good, and obviously you can couple Foden with Haaland as well. But some kind of 5-man midfield like this would look pretty good. The problem is, if you don't have the wild card in game week 13, it's quite difficult to get to, because if you swap one of your midfielders, and I've looked at this, right, I could swap, depending on who's fit, Solanke or Mitrovic, and put that money into midfield, and I'd easily have enough money to upgrade Andreas to an £8 million midfielder, because I'm selling Trent, right? You just saw when I went through my team, I've got loads in the bank. I don't even know what to do with it. But the problem is, Andreas Pereira is probably the best bench option in attack, right? He's much better than all the forwards. You've got to spend a lot more. But also, I think if you've got the money to go from Andreas to a midfielder and you don't have to downgrade your forwards, i.e. if Mitrovic was fit and I could have Mitrovic, Solanke and Haaland and upgrade Andreas Pereira, that is something that I might consider, because in game week 12 I've still got full cover. But if to get to that 5-man midfield you have to downgrade one of your forwards to a 4.5, well, that player's not going to play. Then you're going to leave yourself stuck for game week 12. So I think it depends how much money you've got to spread around and what you might need for future transfers. But I think it's okay to start thinking about. I know Andreas Pereira, right? He is really, really, really good value, right? Absolutely fully agree with that. But he's only gone up to 4.6. So if you have to buy him back later, it's only going to cost you 0.1 million more. So if you've got a fairly decent defence that's cheap, and you can afford to keep the strikers you got. So in my case, Mitrovic and Solanke along with Haaland, and I can upgrade Andreas, and it fits in with all my other transfer plans, it might be worth it. But in my case, I know that the two that I really want blank in game week 12, Saka and Foden. So it makes it a bit more difficult. Like, I think Bowen is good, but with Liverpool away, I know, again, I've just said they've not been defending well. It doesn't make me want to rush out to get him. So I think it all depends on how you're set up. I don't want to say it's optimal because this changes really quickly. A few weeks ago, nobody wanted £7 and £8 million midfielders. Now we suddenly want 5 of them. A few weeks ago, it was big at the back. Then it was 3-4-3. Now we're saying it's 3-5-2. I don't think there's a rush to do this, but I do think it looks pretty good going forward if you can make it work. Okay, so we've spoken about second premium attackers quite a lot, but the questions keep rolling in. So is a premium midfielder still the way to go, or should we look for better value there? So obviously you got the £8 million midfielders, etc., and go for Kane and Haaland up front instead. I think a lot of people will tell you Kane has probably been the second best premium for a little while now. I know De Bruyne has done really well too, but Kane has been super consistent. I think at this point, right, in the game week 12 blank is super annoying. I keep thinking about plans and I'm like, no, I can't do that because of the blank, etc. I think you probably stick with what you've got. I think a lot of people that went Kane on Game Week 8 wildcard are now thinking, I don't need to switch to Salah. I've got other stuff to sort out. I'll just keep Harry Kane. And right now that looks pretty good because either you're in the 3-5-2 that we just spoke about with Haaland and Kane up front, bunch of midfielders, looks great, or you're in a 3-4-3 where, yes, there's quite a few forward options still, but when I went through the examples of who you could sell Mitrovic for, I don't know if there's any massively standout players that are nailed, penalties, and have got really good fixtures. Like, Tony is fine, but he's just fine, right? He's not that exciting. So I think if you're in a 3-5-2, great, or if you've got these two plus one other, that's perfectly okay. And I don't think many people are going to look to switch to Salah. I think captaincy's done at the moment. As long as Haaland keeps doing what he's doing, and I don't see why that's going to slow up anytime soon, and he's fit, most people are going to captain him outside of game week 12. So you've got to think about that, because if you are a Harry Kane owner, you've got Man United away, you could captain him in that game, but it's not necessarily ideal. Some of you will be thinking about going Maddison possibly, or Zaha, bringing in Trossard. That's fine, but just think about it. That's all I'm saying. So I think you can stick with Harry Kane. And likewise, if you've got De Bruyne, I don't know if, given everything else that's going on right now, unless your team looks absolutely perfect, I don't think I'd want to use 2 transfers. I certainly wouldn't want to take a hit to change the funds from De Bruyne to Kane. If I wasn't happy with De Bruyne after this week or even this week, I'd just go to Son or Salah instead. And I've got Salah, and don't get me wrong, I have looked at going to Harry Kane given his returns recently, but I just don't think it's worth the spare transfers to do that. I think there's other things that I want to do. And because of captaincy, I'm less worried about having to do that. Right? I just don't believe that Mo Salah is going to keep on blanking like he has done. He probably will this week because Man City at home is a tough fixture, but a guy's got penalties, right? You never know. But after this week, West Ham, Forest, Leeds, Southampton in 16, like I already spoke about, they're pretty good fixtures, and I think you can keep hold of them. So if I was wildcarding, would I definitely have Salah? That's hard to kind of say because I've not given it a much thought. And I think if Kane keeps performing, he's got some pretty nice fixtures. You could go for those two in a 3-5-2 and just make your midfield cheaper. But I don't think without the wildcard I'd be in a rush to swap what I've got. I think Kane to Salah is still on in game week 12 if you want to captain him. But if you're not really sure about that, you probably just stick with the premium you've got right now because you're going to captain Haaland anyway. So a few people are still asking about wildcard strategy. Obviously, most people at this point, if they've not used it, are going to use it in game week 13. But there was some interesting discussion that came up on one of my YouTube members' live streams. Right, if you want to check them out, you can become a YouTube member. There's a link in the description below. And it was basically around wildcarding in game weeks 11 or 12 to basically deal with all the issues that are going on right now in terms of injuries and stuff like that. Obviously, getting a decent team for this week and for the blank and being able to set up for game week 13 onwards. And I do think in some situations it does make sense because there's a lot of people out there that have got 3 or 4 Man City and Arsenal, and they got a bunch of injured players. It could be Patterson, it could be Nico Williams that's lost his place, James Mitrovic, etc. You know who they all are. So this question was, what should be the wildcard strategy for those that haven't used the chip yet? I'm undecided on 12 versus 13, but I also think that 11 deserves some thought as well. Now I will kind of caveat this by saying I have not looked in depth at all at what a wildcard team would look like this week or in 12. I've got an idea of what it would look like in 13, but 11 and 12 I've not looked at. So you're going to go and have to put the team together yourself and see what you think. Go and use a transfer planner like on FPL.team, but I think it could be viable. The only problem is, if you haven't thought about it up until this point, you've not got long until the deadline, and so that then becomes a bit of a rush, right? And I cannot help you with what the team will look like because I've not thought about it, right? But wildcard in game week 11, you can sort out any issues in 11 and 12. So any players that are doubts that you don't necessarily need long term, you get rid of them. You set up well for this week. You have a good bench for next week as well for the blank. You can carry 3 Man City and Arsenal players. The key thing about wildcard in game week 11 is you get to roll a transfer in game week 12. So in game week 13, you got 2 free transfers to bring in 2 more Arsenal and City players. And you can just set yourself up in a way where, I don't know, maybe you have Bowen or Zaha, whoever it is, in midfield for 11 and 12. They then become Saka and Foden in 13, right? Whoever it might be. It could be Maddison instead. So that's what one of the key things is about game week 11 is you get to roll a transfer in 12. You should be setting up your wildcard to be able to roll that week. And then you get, basically, you'll have 5 City and Arsenal players in game week 13, which sounds pretty nice to me. The only issue is, obviously, you're doing it now. Game week, I mean, with the midweek, game week 13 is not that far away. So you'd be really unlucky to get a load of other issues. But obviously, if they crop up, you might have to use your transfers on other stuff. But that's the same in any given game week. Game week 12, you can go for more of a punt this week. The issue I see is you can bench 3 Man City Arsenal, but you'll only have 1 transfer in game week 13. So you're a little bit less flexible in how you get to more City and Arsenal players, which is what a lot of people want to do. But you're also 1 game week down the line. So if any issues crop up this week, you can deal with them next week. For what it's worth, again, without having looked into the teams too much, I feel like game week 11 is better than 12, but I could be wrong about that. And then game week 13, obviously, you just get 6 City and Arsenal. You sort everything else out. You stop worrying about having to have a bench. I think that is one big thing for game week 13. Like, I'm not saying you should absolutely tank the bench and just have really, really bad players, but you don't necessarily need that third player because you're not worried about any blank game weeks, right? So very unlikely that's going to happen between 13 and 16, and you can just absolutely smash the last 4 game weeks. So for what it's worth, if your team's in a good position for 11 and 12, or you can fix it with transfers, I probably wouldn't change your plan to go for game week 13. But if you're looking at possibly going for 12, I would possibly consider 11 as well, just for that extra transfer and the fact you can deal with all the issues this week and next week. But it's going to depend on how your team looks and stuff like that and whether you're happy with it. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to go and get it edited and put out ASAP ahead of the deadline. Obviously, if there are any major updates, I will put them in the comments, but I'll also talk about them on the deadline stream later today. So that will be around 4:30 ahead of the 6:30 deadline UK time. And obviously, I'll go through my moves and stuff like that. I've not made any of them for my team this week, so we'll do them all live on the deadline stream later. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon.